It's not about black and white. It's about the continuous culture appropriation and falsification of history that has been done by what the so-called Afrocentrist movement.
Egyptians are angry. Many people from Egypt are claiming to be the victims of a plot. A plot concocted by a mysterious group of African Americans who belong to a sect called Afrocentrism. These people are often portrayed as desperate individuals searching for identity and greatness because their own history lacks excitement. It's said that they want to claim Egypt as their own simply because it's located in Africa. At least that's what we can hear all over the media these days.
But the thing is, that's why you find people like Kevin Hart, who subscribes to these theories, who claim that his ancestors built the pyramids. I'm sorry.
There's been a whole movement on this called Egypt for Egyptians, with apparently young Egyptians standing to fight for their history and showing that they look just like their ancestors. Have you noticed that most of these people are extremely racist? And it seems normal for them to say all these things. They are completely against the idea of a black presence in ancient Egypt, except if it's related to slavery. But that's not a surprise when we see how Zahi Hawass talks about indigenous Africans.
No, they were dark skinned, but they were not black, but they're not Negro. Because look at the lips of the Negroes like that, and the rose like this. It's not really in the Egyptian origin at all. It's different, completely different.
Despite the fact that the country borders Sudan, the blackest country in the world. And to justify their claims, they use the following visuals. Especially these visuals. But to me, there is a deeper motivation behind all this uproar. So, I want you to bear with me as we discover that truth. The real reason Egyptians are fighting so-called Afrocentrists. Apparently, all this started with the polemic surrounding the new Netflix documentary about Cleopatra. But as I told you, it is actually deeper than that. These last years, there has been an awakening wave all over people of African descent in the world. Many Africans started to seriously question the narrative they've been taught about African history. They noticed that most of what we've been taught was a lie. And their voices suddenly started to be heard because their arguments made sense. And this does not please those who benefit from the lies. To maintain the people in darkness, they started this victimization campaign to gain the world's support. All this is mainly motivated by the desire to maintain the status quo and prevent the truth from emerging. The truth doesn't match their current ideals. In one of my last videos, I mentioned the importance of soft power in our world. Soft power is basically the power that comes from your peers' perception of you, from your reputation. It can impact your level of influence in the world. It can be applied at an individual level, but also at a larger scale, like in the case of a nation, a continent, or an ethnic group, for example. Usually people craft the way they want to be perceived. And usually they choose the most advantageous image based on their ideals and the power dynamics of the world around them. These ideals can also depend on who is in charge of that nation, meaning which ethnic group, for example. A nation in Scandinavia usually has completely different beauty standards than a nation in Africa. And that's normal. Beauty is subjective. It depends on cultures, locations, and many other factors. So, in the case of a nation, these factors are also dependent on who the rulers are and what are their ideals. Obviously, a country under Arab influence will have different ideals than a country under African influence. So, why am I talking about this? Today, the ancient civilization of Kemet became the Arab Republic of Egypt. The territory went through numerous invasions over the last millennia, to the point that it completely got disconnected from its original roots. The last significant one being the Arab invasion. Today, the ideals of that country look like this. While in ancient times, it really looked like this. So, to me, the true reason behind this sudden uproar is actually a deep desire to control the image of what an indigenous ancient Egyptian is supposed to look like in people's minds. thus controlling the narrative of Kemet's origins. Then I heard about this. An Egyptian lawyer filed a complaint against Netflix for portraying Cleopatra VII as a black woman instead of as an Egyptian. I just want to precise that this video is not about Cleopatra's ethnicity. If you want to know my opinion about that, you can watch my video about it, here. In his lawsuit, the lawyer said most of what Netflix platform displays do not conform to Islamic and societal values and principles, especially Egyptian ones. He added that in order to preserve the Egyptian national and cultural identity among Egyptians all over the world, there must be pride in the makings of such work. Well, the problem with his claims is that neither Cleopatra nor ancient Egypt was Islamic. None of the pharaohs was actually Egyptian, as he says. The country was called Kemet. It was an indigenous African nation. It's obvious now that all this has nothing to do with the truth. It is due to the fact that today the country is linked to and under the influence of its latest invaders. They practice the same culture, religion, and even named themselves the Arab Republic of Egypt. People tend to try to associate themselves with what they admire. We all love people who look like champions, winners, conquerors. They are attractive, right? And we want a bit of their light to spill over us. We secretly want to become them. And due to colonization and the destruction of the image of Africa, African soft power has deteriorated over the last millennia. So, now those who got conquered in the north are trying to detach themselves from their roots to acquire the features and the identity of their conquerors, despite sometimes clear evidence of their African roots. That's an attempt to escape from oneself, a mark of self-hatred and the manifestation of a hidden inferiority complex. A form of Stockholm Syndrome quite common among colonized populations. Therefore, the ancient African civilizations that once flourished in these areas are now automatically being linked to Arabia, the Middle East, or Europe, to the point that in most people's minds, it couldn't have been created by indigenous Africans. So, they are ready to gift the credit of these indigenous African civilizations to foreign people just to feel accepted by them. Today, the population of the region doesn't care about true history. They are just trying to project their modern ideals into the ancient civilization, which equate to falsifying history. For example, according to ancient Egyptians, their nation emerged in Inner Africa. Their gods came from and lived in Inner Africa. Their kings came from Inner Africa. And their culture also came from Inner Africa. A good example of that can be their wigs and hairstyles. They were always inspired by African hairstyles. Actually, when we look at all ancient populations' depictions, it is obvious that ancient Egyptians and Nubians. What I am about to tell you now will completely change the way you see our world. As soon as an individual carries any of these features, we tend to look for some non-black origin in his lineage. But the truth is that black people with red or blonde hair exist. Black people with straight hair exist. Black people with colored eyes exist. Black people with Caucasian facial features exist. Black people with white skin exist. And they have existed prior to the emergence of those we call white people. In other words, it didn't necessitate any European or Northern admixture to have those features. That's the proof that these features have nothing to do with a so-called white origin. In fact, black people are actually the ones who gave these features to white people. According to Cheikh Anta Diop, the great African scholar, there were two types of black Africans. Those with kinky and those with straight hair. But both were black. However, was he right? In my video about Ramses II, I explained that the way we see the world today is biased. Especially because we always try to oppose black to white. And we wrongfully attribute all these features to white people, thinking that they are the ones who brought it to the world. But that's not the case. The truth is that there is no opposition to black because it is the root of us all. There is no white without black. But there has been black without the existence of white. And it has actually been the case for 99.9% of the existence of the human race on this planet. It is not even a debate. So, technically, there is no white race. In a way, we can say that there is only one big black race with numerous levels of melanin that we call humanity. One family with a great diversity. Most of us don't understand how the current diversity, especially the one that caused the most problems, which is skin color, emerged. Many of us still think that there was a group of white people who appeared in opposition to black people. This is what racism has created during the last few centuries. Ancient Europeans classified human beings and put those who looked like them on top of that hierarchy, attributing themselves the merit of the achievements of all indigenous melanated people who preceded them. What we have to understand is that most of these mutations started gradually and slower than we think. We've been lied to. People didn't become white with straight blonde hair and colored eyes just by magic one day. The truth is that some black people started to lose melanin in some parts of their bodies, but not all at once. It probably started with hair. Some people developed wavy hair, then straight hair, but they were still black. We can see it with Australian Aboriginals and Indians, for example. They are black with wavy, straight hair, but also kinky hair. And they have all these features without any white people's intervention. Then some people started to lose melanin in their hair. They started to be red-haired or blonde, but still with kinky hair, then with wavy and straight hair when they combined both mutations. Something that we can still observe among the people of the Solomon Islands. Then, due to the climate first and for numerous other reasons later, others started to develop different facial and body features adapted to their new environments, especially cold environments, but they were still black. We can still see many people like this in Africa, but especially in India. Indians are actually black-white people. They have all the features of Europeans, but they have darker skins. And finally, the last and more recent mutation that is also the one that caused the most horrifying problems, skin color. Some people started to lose melanin in their skin. And this is the main feature attributed to white people or northern people. But they actually came last, as you can see in all these studies about genetics and skin color. Prior
Egypt is on the news again. This country is really working hard to get known for all of the wrong reasons. Egypt bans a Dutch museum from making archaeological excavations in Egypt because this Dutch museum has featured Beyoncé playing Nefertiti, Rihanna playing Nefertiti, and Nas playing Tutankhamun and the like. Egypt accuses the museum of supporting Afrocentric views and distorting Egyptian identity. The Dutch museum has condemned this banning, and the Dutch museum has also reported that they have got attacked by trolls. What are my thoughts on this? The idea that a modern nation that we call Egypt can claim and have proprietary right to historical clothing and historical figures is about as far-right ultra-nationalist as it gets. Let's look at human nature. Why this defensive behavior? A human being doesn't behave this defensively, like Egypt does, if they have nothing to hide. If it wouldn't be true that ancient Egypt was black African, why all of this drama? When Europeans played Pharaoh and Cleopatra, not a word from Egypt, because they know it's not true. But when African people and melanated people play ancient Egyptian or Kemetic characters, Egypt acts more defensively than any nation we have seen so far. Are they hiding something?
Egyptians said stop playing with them. Egypt is not in Africa. They said they don't know what you guys are looking at. Egypt is definitely not in Africa, according to them. And the Dutch people responded and said, what in the Helen Keller is going on? If you need the translation in Braille, I got you, because Egypt is definitely in Africa. And matter of fact, this accusation of falsifying history is inappropriate. The exhibition has been made with great care. As scientists, you don't accuse each other like this. I want the qualification to be withdrawn. And the Dutch are really doubling down. They're like, we're not altering crap at this exhibit. Matter of fact, one of you guys need to come see it and have a discussion, because there's nothing wrong with the exhibit at all. But the story didn't even start there, because the Dutch were already in hot water with the Egyptians for saying this. Bottom line, Egypt has a huge battle on their hands if they keep trying to claim that their people look like this and nothing like this.